This franchise exec got recruited off monster.com, and that changed everything.
I had been working for a manufacturing company for a number of years. I was running a few different departments, and there was a little bit of a downturn in manufacturing. And I walked in one day, and the cut was me. And I remember calling my wife and going, I just got downsized. I was trying to find something where I was providing a little more value and I was getting a little more value out of it. Out of nowhere, after a few months of searching, the VP of franchise development for a local company here in Cincinnati called Handyman Connection found my resume on monster.com of all places.
Then he breaks down the one question every candidate should ask before they sign anything.
A candidate going, what's the worst part of your business? What is the thing your franchisees absolutely hate doing or have the biggest issues with?
Stay with us because the questions Scott gives you can save you years and a ton of money. All right, welcome back to another episode of How I Franchise This. I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Scott Oakes. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Happy to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. So before we dive into Comfort Keepers and the senior care space, I'd love to just start all the way at the beginning. You know, how did you end up in the world of franchising?
Yeah, it's funny. I ended up in franchising a lot like a lot of the candidates I talked to find themselves looking. I think I was in my late 20s and had been working for a manufacturing company for a number of years and had kind of just followed what I was supposed to be doing, out of college, and got a job and did that. And I was running a few different departments, and I think it was '03 when I got into it. And so it was '03, and there was a little bit of a downturn in manufacturing at that time. And so we were talking about what types of cutbacks we were going to have to make, where you might have to let people go off your team. And I walked in one day, and the cut was me. Along with about 20 other people in the organization. And I think it was about 28 at the time. And I remember calling my wife and going, I just got downsized. And I go, 28-year-olds don't get downsized, right? Like, I'm still too young to be in that. And it was great because she's like, well, middle management's middle management. So, regardless of when you got there, she's like, you're kind of there. And, they gave me a great package, but it gave me an opportunity to take a minute and pause and think about what I had been doing and what I wanted to do. And, I was in sales, and it was a pretty commoditized business that I was in. And there wasn't a whole lot of meaning or satisfaction out of it other than hit your quota and try to make as much money the next quarter than the next quarter, right? And I was trying to find something where I felt like I was getting I was providing a little more value and I was getting a little more value out of it. And like out of nowhere, after a few months of searching, and this will date me, but the VP of franchise development for a local company here in Cincinnati called Handyman Connection found my resume on monster.com of all places.
No way.
Like one of the last places they'll say no one's ever going to find your resume. You put it out there, but you're really going to have to network. So I was doing all the things, right? And he was looking for somebody to bring in as a director of franchise development that didn't have any bad habits, that hadn't been in franchising before. And the whole thing appealed to me. First off, the concept appealed to me because I am not a handy person. If my wife sees me walking around the house with a toolbox, the antenna's up and like, where are you going? What are you trying to do? Right. So the need for that type of business really appealed to me from a consumer standpoint. I'm like, oh, I completely can see how people need this service. Right. And then the other thing that really appealed to me was being involved in the process of helping people start their own business. You think about it, it's that American dream, right? Starting and building your own business and being successful and betting on yourself. And that really appealed to me, being a part of that process. And the fact that, and this is going to sound kind of anti what we do or the opposite of what we do, but like having the ability to tell people no, that this wasn't a right fit for them, was a part of the process, right? Like we had a job description for what we thought our franchisee was, right? And if it wasn't a fit, it was okay. We were actually doing someone a favor by not just letting them join a franchise when we didn't think they had what it would take to be successful. And so that part of it appealed to me as well too. And once I got into it, it was like I found the thing I was supposed to be doing. And 22, soon to be 23 years later, I'm still in franchising and in franchise development. I just I'm a little heavier and my hair's grayer.
So you found your calling to a sense. You're helping people become entrepreneurs. You're like you said, some people it's not the right fit for, and you get to tell them no. And it's really just advising and coaching on, hey, if you're ready to go have ownership of your career, your life, be a business owner, et cetera. I'm here to help you think through that. I mean
Yeah.
that 20 years of experience. How has that shaped what you look for in a franchise system today? So because you've seen a couple of them.
Yeah. For me, it's a lot of times it allows me to see red flags a lot faster than maybe I used to, and understand that as those red flags start to pop up, don't waste someone's time by avoiding having a conversation with them about what your concerns are with them as a candidate, right? Go ahead and start talking about it. Say, hey, listen, to be successful in the business, you need X, Y, and Z. And kind of based on our couple of conversations, I'm not seeing some of these things. Tell me if what I'm missing here, right? You don't need to do it from a critical standpoint of, hey, you're not this, or this, but it's like, hey, this is what we're kind of looking for. It doesn't feel like there's a match. Help me reconcile that, right? And sometimes by having that conversation with them, you lead them down a path to kind of doing a little bit of a critical review of themselves and saying, oh, you know what, you're right. This isn't something I'm going to be as comfortable with as maybe I had thought or I had hoped to be. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think seeing those red flags a little bit sooner just makes me a little bit more efficient. Um, and it's funny because I always tell people, I always call it franchise recruiting or franchise awarding versus franchise sales, right? But
Yeah.
man, it becomes sales as soon as you realize you've got somebody who you think is going to be a great franchisee, right?
Yeah.
Because then all of a sudden, like, hey, I really want them to go with me. So you do start to get into those sales waters, once you really start to see that somebody could be great for your system. You don't want to lose out on them.
Sure, it's like finding like a perfect employee or like a future spouse. Like you can just tell on the date, you're like, this is going to be such a good match, and I'm really interested in continue to pursue it and make it happen. So I can totally see that. What ultimately led you to Comfort Keepers? And I guess real quick for those listening, what is Comfort Keepers? What's the like one or two sentence description, and then how did you end up with this awesome brand?
Yep. So Comfort Keepers is in the home care, senior care space. It's called a couple of different things, but what we do is we provide primarily non-medical services to predominantly a senior group of clients, folks that are in that 65 plus. Now we do work with adults of any age that need some additional assistance or care in the home. We primarily focus on non-medical, which is companion and personal care services. We're hiring home health aides, CNAs, certified nurses aides to go out and provide services that will allow folks to stay in the home. It could be everything from meal preparation to transportation services to assistance with bathing or changing or grooming or those types of things. Types of services where you don't necessarily need to have a nurse or an RN be the person to administer them.
Amazing. I mean, at the timing, I feel like especially there's such a large aging population. There's more demand than there is supply. It sounds
Yep.
like the brand has a lot of really good core values and culture. And so, like when you found them and decided to work for them, I'm sure it was a bit of a no-brainer.
Oh, for me, it was absolutely a no-brainer because, I mentioned, being in franchising for 22 years. I think it's coming around 9 years or so that I've been in the home care space because I had worked with um, a couple of brands in the home care space and had really enjoyed my time in the space. And so when I started having conversations with comfort keepers, I knew this was a space I was really comfortable with and really had a passion for, because as much as I get jazzed about helping people start their own business and that entrepreneur piece, when you take a look at the services that we're providing and the impact that our franchisees and our caregivers make in their local market, taking care of people's moms and dads and grandparents, it puts another level of importance and weight to what you're doing, which just gives me another level of personal satisfaction. So being in that home care space has really spoken to me, which is probably why I'm back in there. But the great thing about coming into Comfort Keepers was that, for me, this was a legacy brand. Comfort Keepers is, over 25 plus years old. So, they've got a long track record of success in this business. And at the time, I was being brought in to really kind of revitalize their franchise development efforts. Their growth, the previous number of years had really been focused on company ops locations and growing that way. And they really wanted to be back to being 100% franchisee focused. So they were going through a refranchising project, refranchising their company ops locations, and really wanted to get franchise development back up and going. So it was an opportunity for me to build out pretty much not 100% from scratch, but close to scratch. The awarding and the recruiting process, and do it though with a brand that wasn't an emerging brand, that had that track record, that had plenty of successful franchisees, that all we needed to do was start getting the word out about all the great things our franchisees were doing and that we were doing, and then get that recruiting engine and lead generation engine up and going.
Mhm. And I agree with something you said earlier too. It's such a mission-driven, critical, societally important service.
Mhm.
It's so relatable to anyone listening too. We all have parents, and we all, I'm assuming, likely care about them a lot. And so the service that your business provides is a need. It's not a want. It's not a luxury, and it's also very emotionally compelling and rewarding. I want to take a step out and zoom out a little bit on just the senior care category in general. It's something I
Mhm.
talk about on a lot of other podcasts. Is just the sheer size of it, the timing of it, et cetera. What today, in this moment, excites you the most about the senior care category in general?
I think one of the things people talk a lot about, and it's certainly something that resonates with me, is just the sheer demographics and the demand for these types of services. To your point, it is definitely a needs-based business. This is not something that is a fad or a trend, or it's something that's going to go away 5 years from now. So, if you're looking for a business that may not be a flash in the pan, that is still going to be around 10, 15 years from now, the space, and especially with Comfort Keepers, where we have franchisees that are celebrating their 20th, 22nd, 23rd, soon to be their 25th year in business. So these are businesses that they've been able to build and run for a significant amount of time. And so just the long term, both from the short-term and long-term opportunity in this is what really excites me, and that it's not reliant on a particular trend or a particular product to drive it.
I see a lot of tailwinds in the senior care business. There's the silver tsunami coming. There's the aging baby boomer population. Tons of assets are about to change hands, but more importantly, these seniors are going to need care, whether that's in-home, facility-based. What other tailwinds do you guys see, from your perspective, that you're really excited about for your business and for your franchisees?
So in terms of talking about the demographics, just because what's been driving it the last 20 years is this baby boomer population, right? Where you're talking about 10,000 people every day turning 65. Well, those people that have been turning 65 for the last 10 to 15 years are getting into their 70s and 80s and 90s now, right? And yeah, great that life expectancy stretches out now more than it has been in the past. The problem is that you don't get those years in your 20s and 30s when you're adding it on. You get them in your 70s and 80s when you do have need a little more help, and there, you've got some more fragility there. So that's pushing it. And then kind of the next thing, and this is scary for me because I'm one of them, is that you're starting to see that first wave of Gen Xers starting to get into their early and mid 60s, right? And so, the demographics continue to pull that way. And what happens is, at least from my standpoint, is that it's making it more of a need, and that's going to drive a behavior from a government standpoint. One of the misnomers for a lot of folks about home care is that, hey, when I turn 65, Medicare, Medicaid pretty much cover everything, right? And the short answer is that it doesn't. And so a lot of our business is predominantly private pay, because a lot of services don't, a lot of those coverages don't cover home care, and so it's a lot of out-of-pocket spend for folks, which is where we've built our business on. But as those population groups continue to age and the need for that grows, there's going to be more home care services covered by those down the line because it's going to be demanded by the industry. So I think that's going to offset some of the private pay requirements. And so that's another thing that kind of gets me excited about the business as well.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that as far as like having, government or insurance-based support and what does that do to the model? And that's fascinating. I think
Yep.
you might have answered this question, but I was going to ask, is there some large misconception that people have, about operating a home care franchise? Is, something that you wouldn't typically expect on the onset, before getting into it?
I would say that the the recruiting of caregivers is something that is ongoing. You never stop recruiting for caregivers, right? You never have enough. And then you also always are also looking to improve upon the ones that you have, right? We've got amazing caregivers, but it is not a, hey, I recruited this week and then so I don't have to recruit for another 3 weeks, right? You're always recruiting caregivers. So I tend to look at like the two big pieces of this business are, you're always trying to find new clients, you're always trying to recruit caregivers, right? Because a senior care business is managing your two basic fundamentals of supply and demand, right? And so you've got to be focused on those, and you've got to be working on those simultaneously. And so I would say that if you're growing and if you've got a growth mindset, you never stop doing one of those things. You never have enough of either.
Yep. And I think, we've talked about the macro big picture. I think no one can deny that there's clearly a need. We've actually like kind of secret shopped a few different markets, acting as though like, hey, I'm looking for care for my own parents. And like there's wait lists everywhere. There's clearly all this like demand, but not enough supply.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a somewhat crowded market, right? There's a lot of senior care solutions. There's in-home medical-based care. There's in-home non-medical-based care. There's facility-based care. There's families that are, kind of co-oping together and taking care of each other. And they have, their seniors' house get prepped with ramps and, bars within the bathroom, et cetera.
Yep.
How does, Comfort Keeper's model truly differentiate itself in the category?
So for us, I like to hang our hat on three things. The first one is our approach to how we go about caring for our clients, and we take an approach. It's an interactive caregiving approach, where there is a lot of conversation in the senior care space talking about all the negative things that could happen, right? In terms of, hey, what if someone has a fall, right? What if, someone with dementia exits the home without anyone noticing, right? Like all of these fear-based things that you need to make sure that you account for. And then also talking about getting the to-do list done, right? And so, not that our care is not focused on those things. We definitely want to make sure that our clients are safe, and we want to make sure that we're tackling the tasks that need to be tackled. But we think and we believe and we know is that there's an opportunity to also think about the quality of life of that senior. Just because you're in your late 70s or your 80s and you need some care at home doesn't mean your day doesn't or it can't be enjoyable, that you can have moments of joy throughout the day. So we train our caregivers to, as they're doing those things that check the box, that they're interacting with the clients, that we're learning about, when we're doing an in-home consultation with a client, we're learning about who that person is, what their hobbies are, what are things that they used to like to do that maybe they don't do anymore. Are they a sports fan? Do they like to garden? Right? Because we want to try to make sure that we're matching up the client and the caregiver that may have similar interests, right? So that we can overlap those commonalities and those similar interests and build into our care plans opportunities for us to bring those interests and those hobbies, and whatever it is that fills that client's cup, into their care plan, and that we're engaging with them throughout the day. And ultimately the goal is that when our caregivers are in the client's home, that's the best part of their day.
Mm-hmm.
And the, in home care, there's so much conversation about, hey, I've just got to find a body to fill a shift, right? I got somebody
Mm-hmm.
there. You got your meal. Everybody was fine, and that checked the box of home care. And we feel like it can be done at a higher level, and a much more meaningful level for our clients. So that would be that's a long-winded first answer, but that's kind of the first thing I would talk about from our differentiator. The second thing from a franchise standpoint is our support. The folks that work with our franchisees on a daily basis, our regional directors and our operational support team, everybody on that team has worked in a Comfort Keepers business or a home care agency of their own, or they may have run their own agency on the side. They've all got real world experience doing what our franchisees and their staffs are doing. So they're not just giving advice from a theoretical, or because this is what the ops manual says, or this is what the training says. They've all been there, done that, and that not only gives them a lot of credibility, but it makes it makes the advice they give pretty darn good. And I would put the experience of our support team up against anybody in our space, and I think it makes a meaningful impact on that support our franchisees are getting.
Yep.
And then the third piece is just our approach to recruiting caregivers and retaining them, right? You can recruit caregivers all day, but if you don't put them in environments where they can be successful, where they enjoy what they're doing, where they feel valued, where they feel like they have a voice, where they're recognized for that extra effort. Our caregivers do amazing things. We've had caregivers that the roads have been shut down and they go and sleep in their car at the clients the night before so they can be there for that next shift, right? Or and yeah, it's amazing, the level of passion and effort that these folks put into their daily jobs, and we want to make sure they feel valued and recognized for it. And the better job that we do taking care of our caregivers, the better job they will do taking care of our clients. And so we weave that into our best practices and our recruiting, and giving our caregivers additional training opportunities so that we're investing in them. And so I would say those three things are really some of the key differentiators that help separate us from everybody else and also make us a little bit different.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said, and it's clear. I mean, with your guys' success from a brand level, but you and I both know in franchising, a lot of that success also depends on the franchisee and the individual operator. So I want to talk about that group next. Have you noticed in some of your top operators, is there a quality or a trait or a characteristic that they have, that tend to allow them to perform better within this kind of business, within, your system?
Um, I would probably say our best operators are a combination of a good business sense and a good why. like they have a good passion for this as well. I always like to say our franchisees are not looking to run a nonprofit, right? So they understand that they want to run a business that generates revenue, that has a good bottom line. But they also know that every time they add a new client, they're getting a chance to help somebody else, and they've got a passion for helping folks. They are empathetic, and that starts from the top down. That's the example they're setting for their office staffs, for their caregivers. And so I would say, our best franchisees have that combination of knowing why they're in business, and also having that ambition and drive to try to help as many people as possible, because it's good business, and it's good for the folks.
Yep. Are there certain skills, specific skills that some of your best operators have that jump out to you?
You know what? I'm looking for folks that are comfortable managing people, that are comfortable being in leadership roles, right? Because when you run and operate your own business, everybody's looking to you to be the example, right? And to say, okay, this is the standard that they're setting, right? We want people so are comfortable in the leadership role. I think any good franchisee, and specifically in our business, needs to be comfortable being that community liaison, getting out of your office, or getting out of your storefront or restaurant or whatever, and getting out in the community and building those relationships. And in home care, it's really important because a lot of the business that we get are through referral sources, where you have to go out and build those relationships to generate the referrals. And so you can't be a wallflower in this business, or any business, I think, and ultimately be successful. And then the other thing is just a multitasker. As a small business owner, man, you wear a lot of different hats, and some days you have to change them a heck of a lot faster than you thought. Going from your sales hat to your HR hat to your customer service hat to your accounting hat, and you have to be comfortable with kind of that ever changing variance of priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, adaptability and perseverance. I mean, I think that's a well said answer, and carries for a lot of business, but I can imagine especially for for this one. One other thing I'm curious about is, and we saw this when I was doing my franchise business. It was a laundromat franchise called Laundrolab, and we'd
Mm-hmm.
have candidates come through, and they were looking at us versus a salon suites, and something completely unrelated to laundry. I'm sure you have individuals coming through that are thinking senior care, and they're looking at other senior care businesses, but they might also be looking at completely unrelated things to senior care, maybe home services or something else.
Mm-hmm.
What usually becomes the deciding factor, in your opinion, as to why they go with a Comfort Keepers opportunity versus a completely different industry?
I think the thing that I hear so many times from candidates is that they feel like we're going to put them in the best position to be successful. Whether it's because of our systems, our processes, our training, or because of our support team, because of the amount of engaged franchise owners that we have in our community. We've got franchisees that show up for conferences, that show up for webinar calls. We've got performance management groups where we've got 8 to 9 franchisees that meet on a quarterly basis to act as each other's board of directors, and be able to hold each other accountable for everything from growth to what you're doing good to what you're not doing well, right? And so we've got such a great community of franchisees. When they look at the entire scope of what they're going to get for being a Comfort Keepers franchisee, for them, it's that you're going to give me everything I need to be successful. I need to just go execute.
Mm-hmm.
And then you couple that with an industry that has the demand that we have out there, that's not tied to a product where you're going to have to worry about, costs going up and down, right? Or product
Yep.
availability, or heaven forbid, you get your product from overseas, and now you've got things like tariffs impacting it, right? It's a business that's insulated from a lot of that ancillary stuff that you're not in control of.
That's a really good point. There's a lot of recession resistance. It's insulated. There's not inventory. Yes, there's people, but it's one. I tell everyone, like, every deal or every business has not hair on it, but something that's going to be challenging, right? Like, there's going to be
Yep.
some element that's challenging, and some have all seven challenging things. They got, hourly labor, they've got food, they've got, overseas things, et cetera. But what I like
Yeah.
about, senior care and your guys' brand especially is that, like you said, it's insulated, and there's a lot of, tailwinds behind your back as well. I want to talk about scaling a little bit because, as you mentioned, you're one of the more established, well-known, long-standing brands in senior care. How do you guys think about approaching scaling responsibly, especially in such a people-driven business and in one that is so emotionally charged, with the care of a loved one? How do you guys think about scaling and doing it at the right, pace and speed?
The phrase I like to use is called responsibly aggressive growth, right?
There you go.
And so for us, we've got over 600 operating territories across the U.S. We've got, I think it was around 215 or so individual franchisees in our system. So we've got a lot of multi territory operators in our business, and we know that every one of our franchisees brings a different skill set, a different set of experiences, and have things to contribute to the franchise system as a whole, right? So part of our growth directive is to try to bring in new franchisees because, for a lot of brands, the easiest thing to do is to grow with your existing franchisees, right? And
Yep.
and and it's not that we don't want to grow with our existing franchisees. We have great franchisees, and we will grow with them. But we also didn't feel like, hey, we needed to go around soliciting franchisees for growth. If they were ready and they wanted to grow, great, we'll grow with them. But we also know we want to bring in new folks with that new ambition, that new drive, and those different experiences that we know can contribute to us. So that's been part of our objective as we've kind of rebuild our franchise development efforts, is that, yeah, we want to bring in new franchisees to help drive that growth. From a scaling standpoint with our existing franchisees, I think when we award a territory, we expect all of our territories to perform at similar levels, right? And sometimes, multi-territory operators, they want to protect this region or they want to buy that region, right? So, when our franchisees come to us that they want to buy an additional territory, we want to make sure, A, they've got the capitalization for it. B, their current territories are already operating at a successful full level, are in compliance, and we want them to put together kind of a mini business plan in terms of how are you going to staff it, what's your ramp up period, so that they've gone through that, and now we also have that plan so we can work with them on that plan to make sure they get to where they want to go. As opposed to just saying, oh, you want one? Great, that's going to be another deal. We'll just go ahead and sign you up without looking at anything critically just to make sure that it's the right thing, right? Because I've seen brands, allow their franchisees to expand themselves out of business by growing too fast that wasn't sustainable. So, from your point about responsible scaling, that's how we put the guardrails on there to make sure we're helping people scale and ramp up at the right times.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned it's a lot of it's getting the right people too. It's the right operators, the right team internally. And you've already mentioned some of the positive traits or the green flags that you might look for in a strong candidate or a strong fit. But what are some of the red flags when you talk to an individual that's interested in in your brand? What are some things that jump out as far as like, hey, we don't know if this is a good fit for what we're doing?
One of the first big red flags that stick out for me is that people just want to jump around on the process, right? I've had people call, request for information. I give them a call back, and within 5 minutes before I really feel like they've got a good understanding of what we do and who we are, they're like, hey, can you send me the FDD? It's like, well, hold on a second. Let's, like we're a franchise, right? We've got a system and a process for everything. And part of our evaluation process is to determine whether or not you can follow a process. So that's part of the reason why we've got a step-by-step process that we want people to go through, right? And so when people start wanting to jump ahead or skip this or that, that's always a bit of a red flag to me. Specifically in home care, what's a little bit of a red flag to me is people that only want to talk about the financial numbers from the get-go, right? Oh, there's so many old people out there, right? And so the revenue numbers are absolutely going to work, and there's absolutely no conversation about their why about the business, or their why is 100% around money. And again, I get it. You know what? You're investing a lot of money. Your expectation is that you're going to get a business that returns that at multiple levels, provides you with an income, all of that. And at the end of the day, guess what? If our business didn't, we wouldn't be in business as long as we have. We wouldn't have as many franchisees. So there's just some assumptions that you can make there. And so I want to understand their why a little bit more. And when there's no talk of that or insinuation about that, that's always a little bit of a red flag to me, because our business is such a people business, and it can be a very emotional time for our families and our clients. And so I always want to make sure that I've got a check on that as we take people through the process.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask you about too is, you know, for those listening, typically franchise brands will sell, territories, they sell units. Sometimes you can buy multiple units, multiple territories. How do you think about multi-unit growth in senior care versus other franchise categories? Some it's very black and white. It's like, hey, this industry can support 10, chicken shops or chicken sandwich shops, and so they can sell 10. But for senior care, where it's more territory based, how do you think about multi-unit opportunities and growth in this category?
Well, I definitely think the opportunities for multi-unit operators is just as robust as other industries. I think our largest franchisee has 16 territories that they operate. They've got territories in different states. They've got general managers running it, so they've really turned it into a enterprise business. But flip side is you don't start there, right? We didn't award him a 16 pack when he first started and have this huge development schedule, right? Because, the most we'll award somebody up front is 2 territories up front and usually those are contiguous adjacent areas that they can run out of a single office, right? And so, from a scalability standpoint, it's fairly easy to scale a 2 territory business, right? We want to see, okay, let's build it up and see how it is, and then start talking about, expansion from there. So I don't think traditionally you would see things like, oh, I sold a 3-pack or a 5-pack to somebody in the senior care space, because we want to make sure we've got the right operator who can be successful and not have a bunch of signed but not opens in there, right? Because now we've got folks taking up space that is not generating any revenue for them. They're not they're not helping anybody in these areas that are staying dormant. So we want to make sure that when we award a territory, it's actually going to be open within 6 months of us awarding it, right? So I think that's where you see a little bit of a difference in the senior care space than other franchise models.
Yep. I mean, Scott, you have a really interesting perspective because you've seen, multiple different brands. You've been, in and around the franchise space for a few decades. I want to shift some of the questions over to just, the future of franchising in general. And from your vantage point, have you seen any big changes in the franchise buyer, like persona or type over the last few years? Or has it been the same is it corporate escapees, or is it other entrepreneurs that are becoming, entrepreneurs again, or more entrepreneurial, and they're adding to their portfolio of things? Or have you seen that change at all?
I think from that persona standpoint, that has been relatively consistent, right? It's just the life cycle of employment, right? You feel like you're following a path out of high school or college, and I went and got this job, and I've worked in this industry for 15 years, and I've built up a reputation, I've gotten this experience, and then you find yourself at a crossroads, right? So you've got a lot of those folks that are ready to make a change and say, you know what, I've been working really hard for somebody else, I want to work really hard for me, right? And I think those types of things are evergreen. I think how candidates research franchises has changed significantly in my time. There was a time where you didn't put a lot out on your website because you wanted to get them to request information so you could start talking and engaging with them immediately, right? And so that it was kind of like, hey, I'm going to keep all this information back here so that I can get you to engage with me. And that today it's completely different, right? I'm talking to folks that have been researching and looking at these for 6, 8, 12 months before they request information for us, right? But they've been looking at content, they've been looking at our site, competitor sites, they're looking to see where we're popping up at, they're looking at senior staff on LinkedIn, right? These are some of the most informed buyers today than we've ever had, right? And so that's a big change from where we were 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And
Um,
hopefully that's a good thing, right? You got more prepared, more sophisticated, better operators, and
Well, you know what a
because
better informed buyer does? They come in with better expectations. There's
yep,
less surprises. And when you set expectations, right, when they've got expectations, what that does is that when they finally become a franchisee and the things start happening that you said would happen, that that lowers that anxiety for that new franchise owner, right? Hey, I quit my job, I went out and got an SBA loan, or I cashed out my 401k and I'm going to do this. Guess what? They're coming in with some anxiety because yeah, they're betting on themselves, but nothing's happening. Everything's going out right now and not coming in, right? But when you say, hey, this is going to happen and this is how you're going to be supported and we're going to work with you here and this is what the training's going to look like, as those things happen, they're like, okay, yeah. So the next thing that they told me was going to happen is going to happen, right? And after that, and it builds that confidence and it gets the anxiety out of the way, so they just focus on driving that startup. And so a more informed candidate and franchise buyer coming in is not a bad thing at all.
yep. No, I completely agree. And like you said, expectations, but also level of sophistication in the operation. The last thing a franchise system wants is half of the group not performing or being good operators. And so, while it might be more diligence up front and
Yeah.
relationship building and understanding, in the long run, it is better for all things franchising and the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, and that even goes to like, so I've got two franchise recruiting managers that work for me, that work with our candidates, and that's why you've got to have those processes and that consistency. So all the candidates are getting the same information, right? You don't want to be in a training after someone's signing like, oh, that's Joe's candidate and that's Jerry's candidate, because they have two completely sets of expectations going on because yeah, they went through the same process, but they didn't go through the same process, right? And so that's why I work with my team all the time to make sure that we're buttoned up in terms of the processes and the information and the path we're taking candidates through, so everybody comes in with that same set of expectations.
Yep. Well, a lot of our audience, they're either franchise curious, they are franchisees themselves, and they're evaluating other opportunities to explore adding to their existing portfolio. For those, franchise curious that are looking at franchising and businesses in general, for the first time today, what advice would you give them as they, begin that search or as they start to think about getting into the world of business ownership?
I'd say be smart, do your homework, understand the numbers in terms of what it takes to get up and going, what it takes to be successful, ramp up time. But the biggest piece of advice is look at something that you either feel like you've got a connection or a passion about, right? Because it could be the latest greatest trend, which is great. But, if you buy something just on the upside of a trend, are you still going to be excited about it 18 months down the line, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line? Or is it something that's going to kind of fade? And now all of a sudden you're like, great, I got this business and it was really cool at the time, but it's not anymore. Right. So,
Hmm.
um, having a passion or a connection to it is what's going to continue to help you drive that business well beyond the point of when the newness of it wears off.
Yep. That's great. Great advice. Before we wrap up, I want to get into a few lightning round, kind of shorter, fun